The movie begins on November 5th, when Frau picks up the journal she has been writing in for the past several months, and reads a detailed report explaining how she became trapped inside a cabin in the mountains. The whole story started back in May when Frau traveled to a remote hunting cabin in the Austrian Alps with her two friends, Hugo and Louise, along with their beloved dog, Lynx. As soon as they settled into the cabin, Louise asked Hugo to accompany her to a bar in a nearby village, leaving Frau alone with the dog because she was determined to relax after feeling exhausted. The problem was that Frau wasn't used to animals and felt somewhat uncomfortable around the poor dog. She stayed alone until evening, waiting for her friends to return. Eventually, she got bored and tried to pet Lynx, but he bared his teeth and bit her. She spent the rest of the day applying hair and face masks, smoking cigarettes, and exchanging strange looks with the dog. In the end, she went to bed early. The next morning, Frau woke up to find Lynx scratching at the door. She let him outside, then searched the entire cabin and realized that her friends had never returned. Worried that something might have happened to them, she headed toward the village while Lynx ran ahead of her. Suddenly, she heard him whining and rushed over. It looked like he had bumped his nose into something, but she couldn't tell what it was. Frau kept walking, but instead of following her, Lynx backed away. A few steps later, she ran into something that felt like a transparent wall. Startled, she began feeling around with her hands and confirmed that some kind of barrier was blocking her path. She could also hear a pounding sound, but soon realized it was only her own heartbeat. Frau found it strange that nobody came running to investigate, and that none of the curious villagers showed up to see what this mysterious barrier was. No matter how hard she pushed, she couldn't get through it, so she decided to turn back. On her way back, she spotted a farm with two people on it, but the invisible wall prevented her from speaking to them. Her voice couldn't pass through the barrier. The farmers appeared frozen in time, even though water was still flowing from a nearby faucet. Defeated, Frau returned to the cabin and lit a cigarette, feeling that Lynx was now her only companion. Still unwilling to accept her situation, she returned to the road and tried pushing against the barrier again, but it was useless. She had no idea what else to do. Later, she went to bed and suddenly heard a strange noise. She tried to go outside to investigate, but when she opened the door, she discovered that the barrier had somehow sealed off the entrance to the cabin as well. Frau began screaming, and suddenly she woke up in her bed with Lynx greeting her as usual. She immediately rushed to check the door and make sure it was intact before heading out for a walk. In her journal, Frau admits that she can barely remember what else she did that day because the reality she found herself in had left her unable to focus. Later, she returned to the cabin and borrowed her friend's magnifying binoculars to observe the surrounding area. The couple on the farm remained completely motionless, leading her to conclude that they were dead. The same seemed to be true for the villagers. She sat thinking about her friends and wondered whether she should have gone with them so they could have faced whatever happened together. At that moment, Lynx started barking and ran off. When Frau followed him, she discovered that he had found a cow. At first, she hid from it in fear, but eventually she approached it, grew attached to it, and led it back to the cabin so she could use its milk. Frau named the cow Bella and described her as both a blessing and a curse. The following day, she got into her friend's car and drove toward the village, hoping that enough speed might allow her to break through the barrier. She could even see an abandoned vehicle on the other side, which gave her hope. Unfortunately, nothing happened. The car slammed into the invisible wall, causing an accident and injuring her. Ignoring her bleeding wound, Frau touched the invisible barrier and wondered what any of it meant. Over the following days, she tried repeatedly to find a way through, but nothing worked. Eventually, she was forced to face reality. She collapsed onto her bed and surrendered to the fact that no one was coming to rescue her. She even considered ending her own life, but then remembered that her friends had left food and supplies in the cabin. Determined to honor them, she decided to keep living. Those supplies consisted mainly of a large pile of firewood and a few potatoes. She took the potatoes outside and started a small potato garden. Lynx dug alongside her enthusiastically, seemingly determined to help. As the days passed, Frau adjusted the clock every morning and marked each date in her journal so she could keep track of what day it was. On May 30th, it rained all day, so Frau decided to stay inside. But she soon started hearing a strange sound, so she went out to check, holding a knife. She discovered a wet cat outside and decided to adopt it. Now she had 3 animal companions, and Lynx became her closest companion in a world filled with loneliness. In the end, Frau decided to try hunting. She had never used a firearm before, and when she tried to shoot a deer, the gun misfired and injured her, while the animal ran away frightened. As she continued walking, she found another crashed car. She turned on the radio, but most stations were static. Only one was working, though it was playing loud music. She then found a map and decided to follow it in an attempt to reach the valley, with Lynx accompanying her. They walked for hours until they found an abandoned truck. Frau tried to approach it, but the barrier stopped her, forcing them to turn back. After many explorations, while following the map, Frau began memorizing different areas within the barrier. She was now able to take faster routes to the valleys, allowing her to go back and forth in the same day without leaving her other animals alone for too long. Sometimes she found other cabins, but they were always empty, though she could still gather useful supplies from them. Lying on the grass with Lynx under the warm sun and listening to birds, she felt that this experience had changed her. She felt closer to nature, but also guilty when she tried hunting again. Still, she needed deer meat to survive. At night, she couldn't sleep, haunted by the memory of the deer dying. She never wrote about her first hunt because she felt disgusted with herself. One night, she couldn't sleep because of heavy thunder. The next morning, she heard a sound coming from a cupboard. When she opened it, she discovered that the cat had given birth. One of the kittens was white, so she named her Pearl. It started as a small, messy kitten, but eventually grew into a beautiful cat. Frau realized she was spending all her time taking care of animals to avoid losing her mind due to her situation. She had replaced her old job responsibilities with caring for her new companions. On July 20th, she began harvesting hay in the meadow, while Lynx stood silently beside her, supporting her. Her hands hurt and her body was exhausted, but she kept carrying hay back to the cabin every day. She kept checking the farm, but the barrier was still there. It took her about 3 weeks to harvest the entire meadow. She began to realize how hard it is to live alone, and she cried, but still refused to end her life because she didn't want to abandon her animals. After that, she fell into depression, and it took her 2 more weeks to go outside and live again. In the forest, she found fruits on trees and vegetables on the ground, which allowed her to gather enough food for the winter. Now she and her animals were eating much better meals. One day, she noticed strange clothes hanging on a tree. She looked at them in fear, but it turned out to be just a nightmare. Autumn, her favorite season, became difficult for her. She couldn't sleep, her nightmares increased, and she caught a cold, spending most of her days exhausted. Luckily, Lynx was always there to comfort her. Frau was surprised that he was never upset, and she often hugged him to thank him for his companionship. At present, Frau says Lynx has left, but she still finds herself talking to him when she goes out for walks. On October 27th, snow fell for the first time, but it only lasted a few days. Then warm winds arrived, making loud noises day and night. Sleeping became harder for Frau. After 3 days of wind, she went outside and found Pearl dead. She buried the cat properly. In midwinter, she saw a fox near the river and prepared to shoot it, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She couldn't stop thinking about Pearl's death and how she seemed to be the only creature in the forest with a sense of right and wrong. In the end, she chose mercy. At the cabin, Frau fed Bella every day and thought of her as a sister. She noticed the cow had become very fat and wondered if she was pregnant. In the end, she had no choice but to hunt again. The feeling of the deer's heart in her hands while cleaning it kept her awake at night. On January 11th, she noticed Bella was bleeding slightly. She watched her for the whole day, and at night she helped her give birth to a small calf. The winter passed with heavy snowstorms. Frau suffered from seasonal depression, and rarely left her bed unless Lynx comforted her. Any thoughts of ending her life disappeared when she remembered she had to take care of him. After winter ended, she decided to move to another cabin. On May 25th, she gathered all her animals and traveled with them to their new home. When she saw her reflection again, she felt a new hope for the future. From then on, she lived in peace with her animals, the stars, and the nature around her. Her memories of those days remained so vivid that she stopped writing in her journal. On October 16th, she started writing again and spent most of her time increasing her firewood. Her memories from that period were faint. On December 10th, she found a sentence she had written but didn't remember writing. Time passes quickly. With the return of snow, she became more philosophical, thinking about how humans and animals are forced to live their lives without choice. One day, she noticed a white crow circling around her house often, while its flock ignored it. She thought it was beautiful and began feeding it when it was left alone. 2 years passed with Frau living inside the barrier. By then, she had forgotten her old life and lost hope that anyone would ever find her. At the beginning of June, she and her animals moved to a new house, hoping the change would improve her mood. Unfortunately, she could not regain the magic of that first summer. One afternoon, while returning from a walk with Lynx, he suddenly heard something near the house and ran toward it. Frau followed and was shocked to see a stranger killing Bella's calf with an axe. When Lynx jumped to stop him, Frau ran to get her weapon, but she wasn't fast enough. By the time she came back out, Lynx was dead. In a rage, she killed the man, then collapsed holding Lynx's body. She buried him while hearing Bella's sorrowful cries. She threw the man's body off a cliff without any regret, unable to feel anything anymore. After that, she left with Bella and the cat. Soon after, she returned to work, but she was left alone with her thoughts. At present, Frau says she has moved on, and she will always cherish the memories of her animals as motivation to keep living. She finished the report on February 25th when she ran out of paper, then went out to feed the white crow. And that is the end of the story. Thanks for watching, and don't forget that your opinion matters to us. Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.